My beloved child. Your soulmate was not expecting anyone to mention your name that day. In fact, they had spent most of the morning trying not to think about you. They had buried themselves in ordinary things. Messages that needed answering. A cup of coffee they barely touched. A conversation they pretended to be interested in. Anything that could keep their mind from wandering back to the same place it had been returning to for weeks. You. But then a stranger stepped into their path. Not someone from their family. Not one of their close friends. Not anyone they had ever spoken to about you. And somehow, this person knew enough to make your soulmate stop walking. The stranger looked directly at them and said something so unexpected that, for several seconds, your soulmate could not answer. Stay away from them. Your soulmate frowned. Excuse me? The stranger repeated it, only quieter this time. If you know what's good for you, stay away from that person. They did not say your full name at first. They did not need to. Because what they said next made it painfully obvious who they were talking about. They mentioned something about you that very few people knew. Something personal. Something from your past. And suddenly your soulmate's entire body went still. They stared at this stranger, wondering how they could possibly know. How do you know them? The stranger hesitated. And that hesitation was what frightened your soulmate most. Because it did not look like someone spreading a careless rumor. It looked like someone deciding how much truth they were willing to reveal. Finally, the stranger said, I know enough. Your soulmate should have walked away. Part of them wanted to. But another part could not. Because somewhere beneath the shock, something else had already begun to happen. Your soulmate became protective of you. Before the stranger could continue, they asked, What exactly are you trying to say? The stranger looked almost surprised by the question. Perhaps they expected your soulmate to believe them immediately. Perhaps they expected fear. Perhaps they expected your soulmate to hear one warning about you and quietly disappear from your life. Instead, your soulmate stood there. Waiting. The stranger sighed. There are things about them you don't understand. Your soulmate's jaw tightened. Then explain them. For a moment, the stranger said nothing. And your soulmate felt their heartbeat growing louder. Because this was not how they imagined learning something about you. Not like this. Not from someone whose motives they could not read. The stranger finally began talking. They described a version of you your soulmate barely recognized. According to them, you were difficult. Secretive. Emotionally guarded. Someone who had walked away from people without explaining yourself. Someone who could disappear when things became too intense. Someone who had been misunderstood more than once. And for the first few seconds, your soulmate simply listened. Because some of it sounded familiar. They had seen you pull away. They had watched you go quiet. They had experienced moments when getting a clear answer from you felt almost impossible. And there had been nights when your soulmate wondered whether your distance meant you never cared as deeply as they did. The stranger continued. You think you know them. Your soulmate said nothing. But you don't know who they really are. That sentence landed differently. Because those were almost the exact words your soulmate had once whispered to themselves during one of the hardest moments between you. Do I actually know this person? They had wondered that. They had questioned you. They had questioned themselves. And for one dangerous second, the stranger's warning found the old wound perfectly. But then something changed. The stranger began describing an event from your past. A moment when someone close to you had been going through something difficult. According to the stranger, you had suddenly disappeared from several people's lives around that time. People blamed you. They called you selfish, cold, unreliable. Some said you abandoned everyone when they needed you most. Your soulmate felt something sink inside them. Because it sounded bad. Very bad. But then the stranger paused. Their expression changed. And what they said next completely changed the meaning of the story. The truth is, they didn't disappear because they stopped caring. Your soulmate looked up. The stranger swallowed. They disappeared because they were protecting someone. Now your soulmate was confused. Protecting who? The stranger looked away. And suddenly the confidence they had shown earlier was gone. They took the blame for something that wasn't entirely their fault. Your soulmate stared at them. The stranger continued. There were consequences. People were angry. Somebody had to carry it. And instead of explaining what really happened, they stayed quiet. Why? Because telling the truth would have destroyed someone they cared about. That sentence changed everything. Your soulmate's mind immediately returned to every moment when you had struggled to explain yourself. Every time they had accused you of shutting them out. Every moment when they thought your silence meant indifference. What if some of that silence had never been emptiness? What if silence had become something you learned long before meeting them? A survival mechanism. A form of protection. A habit born from carrying things privately so other people would not have to. Your soulmate asked the stranger. Why are you telling me to stay away from them if that's what happened? The stranger gave a strange smile. Not cruel. Almost sad. Because people like that are dangerous. Your soulmate's expression hardened. Dangerous? They'll destroy themselves trying to save everyone else. That was not the answer your soulmate expected. The stranger continued. They'll convince you they're fine when they're falling apart. They'll help you carry your pain and hide theirs. They'll make you think they don't need anyone. Your soulmate could barely breathe. Because now the stranger was describing the person your soulmate had slowly begun to understand. You. Not the mysterious version. Not the rumor. Not the person people had accused. But the part of you your soulmate had occasionally glimpsed when your defenses fell for just a second. The part that cared too much. The part that remembered tiny details. The part that noticed when someone's voice changed. The part that could forgive people long before they apologized. The part that sometimes became distant precisely because your feelings had become too strong. Your soulmate whispered. So why warn me? The stranger looked directly at them. Because loving someone like that will change you. Silence. They won't ask you to rescue them. They probably won't even tell you when they need you. And if you hurt them badly enough, they may forgive you while quietly deciding they can never trust you the same way again. That sentence hurt. Because your soulmate knew there had been moments when they hurt you. Maybe through indecision. Maybe through silence. Maybe through choosing pride instead of honesty. Maybe through believing other people before asking you for your side. Maybe simply by taking too long to understand what you were trying to give them. And suddenly this stranger's warning no longer sounded like a warning against you. It sounded like a warning about what losing you could mean. Your soulmate asked one final question. Who are you? The stranger stared at them for several seconds. Then said something your soulmate was not prepared for. Someone who learned too late. And then they walked away. Your soulmate remained there. Frozen. Watching them disappear into the crowd. But the conversation did not disappear with them. It followed your soulmate everywhere. Back to their car. Back to their room. Into the silence of that evening. They replayed every sentence. Stay away from them. You don't know who they really are. They took the blame. They protect people. Loving someone like that will change you. I learned too late. But one question became impossible to ignore. What exactly had that stranger lost? And why did they seem so certain your soulmate was standing at the edge of making the same mistake? Your soulmate picked up their phone. Your name was still there. They opened your conversation. Scrolled upward. And began reading old messages. At first, they were searching for something specific. A clue. Some evidence that would either prove or disprove what the stranger said. Instead, they found something much harder to face. They found themselves. Their own hesitation. Their unanswered messages. Their half-finished explanations. The times you tried to speak and they changed the subject. The times you asked simple questions and they answered defensively. The moments when you were clearly trying to understand them while they were trying to protect their pride. Then your soulmate found one particular message. It was from months earlier. A message they barely remembered. You had written. I don't need you to understand everything about me. I just need you not to decide who I am before asking me. Your soulmate read it once. Then again. The words felt completely different now. Because that was exactly what nearly happened. A stranger had stepped forward and handed your soulmate a version of you. And for one brief moment, they almost accepted it. Almost. But something in them had refused. Perhaps because they remembered your eyes. Perhaps because they remembered the way you once stayed awake when they were struggling. Perhaps because somewhere beneath all the confusion, they already knew your character more deeply than any rumor could explain. Still, curiosity consumed them. Who was the stranger? And what did they mean by learning too late? Your soulmate began asking questions. Carefully. They contacted someone who knew part of your history. They did not mention the stranger. They simply asked about the period of your life the stranger had described. And slowly, pieces began coming together. Not gossip. Not dramatic secrets. Something more human. Years earlier, someone close to you had made a serious mistake. You could have exposed everything. Doing so would have protected your reputation. People would have understood why you behaved the way you did. But revealing the full truth would also have caused enormous damage to someone you cared about. So you remained silent. You allowed people to misunderstand you. And eventually, the misunderstanding became your reputation in certain circles. Your soulmate could hardly believe it. Because they realized something painful. You had never used that story to win sympathy. You had never brought it up during arguments. Never said, "You don't know what I've survived." Never demanded special treatment because of it. You simply carried it. And suddenly your soulmate understood why certain things scared you. Why betrayal hit you differently. Why false accusations made you shut down instead of fighting. Why sometimes you stopped explaining yourself when you felt someone had already decided what they wanted to believe. You had learned long ago that sometimes telling the truth was not enough to control how people saw you. But there was still one piece missing. The stranger. A few days later, your soulmate finally discovered who they were. And that truth stunned them more than anything else. The stranger was someone who had once been close to you. Very close. Someone who had watched you sacrifice your reputation. Someone who knew the truth. And someone who had stayed silent while other people blamed you. Years had passed. Life moved forward. But guilt had apparently stayed with them. Your soulmate eventually managed to speak with this person again. This time, the conversation was different. No mystery. No warning. Just truth. Your soulmate asked, "Why did you tell me to stay away?" The stranger looked embarrassed. "Because I wanted to see what you would do." "What does that mean?" "I wanted to know whether you'd believe the worst about them as quickly as everyone else did." Your soulmate felt anger rising. That was some kind of test. No. The stranger shook their head. It was guilt. Then they finally admitted everything. Years ago, they had watched people misunderstand you. They knew more than they said. But they were afraid of becoming involved. So they stayed quiet. They assumed eventually someone else would defend you. Nobody did. And by the time they realized the damage their silence had caused, you had already disappeared from their life. "I tried apologizing later," the stranger said. Your soulmate remained silent. "They forgave me." That sounded exactly like you. But they never came back. And there it was. The warning beneath the warning. The stranger was not afraid you would hurt your soulmate. They were afraid your soulmate would repeat their mistake. Take your loyalty for granted. Misread your silence. Assume there would always be another conversation. Another opportunity. Another chance to finally say what should have been said much earlier. The stranger looked at your soulmate and said, "That's who they really are." Your soulmate asked softly, "Who?" "Someone who can forgive you and still choose peace without you." Those words stayed with your soulmate. Because suddenly the possibility of losing you became real. Not through some dramatic ending. Not through betrayal. Not because you stopped loving them. But because one day you might finally realize love should not require constantly proving your intentions. Your soulmate went home that night with a decision forming inside them. They did not want to send another vague message. They did not want to say, "Hey, how have you been?" They did not want to pretend everything between you was casual when both of you knew it had never truly felt casual. So they began typing. Then deleted it. Typed again. Deleted that too. Because every version sounded smaller than what they actually needed to say. Eventually they put the phone down. And for the first time, they admitted something aloud. I judged them. The room was silent. I judged them without knowing everything. They remembered conversations where you tried to explain your fears. Times when your soulmate interpreted your caution as rejection. Times when they wondered why you could not simply trust them completely. Now they understood. Trust had cost you before. And still, you had tried. Perhaps imperfectly. Perhaps cautiously. But you had tried. Your soulmate picked up the phone again. This time, the message was different. No excuses. No manipulation. No attempt to force a reunion. Only accountability. I learned something about you recently. Something I wish I had understood sooner. But more importantly, it made me realize how often I expected you to explain yourself while I wasn't doing enough to make you feel safe enough to speak. They stopped typing. Read it. Then continued. I don't know what happens between us from here. And I'm not asking you to forget anything that hurt you. I just don't want another day to pass while you think I never understood. Their hands were shaking. Because vulnerability felt dangerous. But silence suddenly felt worse. I understand now that some of the moments I thought you were pulling away may have been moments you were protecting yourself. Then came the hardest sentence. And I'm sorry I sometimes became another person you had to protect yourself from. Your soulmate stared at those words for a long time. Then pressed send. And everything became quiet. There was no instant reply. No dramatic phone call. No sudden resolution. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then more. And for once, your soulmate did not become angry. They did not send another message. They did not demand an answer. They simply waited. Because for the first time, they understood that understanding you meant respecting your pace too. Late that night, your soulmate's phone lit up. A message from you. Short. Simple. But enough to make their heart pound. I didn't think you would ever understand that. Your soulmate read it again. Then you sent another message. What happened? And there it was. The door opening. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. Your soulmate considered telling you everything immediately. The stranger. The warning. The story. Instead, they wrote. Someone tried to tell me who you were. A pause. Then. And? Your soulmate smiled sadly. And I realized I should have asked you a long time ago. Several minutes passed. Finally, your message appeared. Asked me what? Your soulmate stared at the screen. Then typed the question that should have been asked before assumptions, distance, fear, and silence had been allowed to grow between you. Who are you when nobody else is telling your story for you? And for the first time in a very long time, you began answering. Not everything. Not all at once. But honestly. You told them things they had never known. Why certain moments affected you. Why you sometimes went silent when emotions became intense. Why being misunderstood frightened you more than disagreement. Why you would rather walk away from a situation than beg someone to believe your intentions. And your soulmate did something different this time. They listened. No interruptions. No defending themselves. No searching for contradictions. Just listening. At one point, you said something that broke their heart. I got tired of trying to convince people I wasn't what they had already decided I was. Your soulmate closed their eyes. Because they knew they had almost become another person on that list. But they also knew something else. They still had a chance not to. The stranger thought they were warning your soulmate about you. Perhaps part of them genuinely believed they were. But the truth was far more complicated. Because what your soulmate discovered was not some terrifying secret about who you were. They discovered the reason you guard your heart. They discovered the loyalty hidden beneath your silence. They discovered that your distance had history. They discovered that your strength had a cost. And most importantly, they discovered something about themselves. Love is not knowing every chapter of someone's past. It is being willing to ask before assuming. It is resisting the temptation to let someone else's version of a person become your truth. Your soulmate almost allowed a stranger to define you. Instead, the warning forced them to finally see you more clearly. And now the sentence haunting your soulmate is no longer. Stay away from them. It is the sentence the stranger said afterward. They'll forgive you, but they may not come back. Because your soulmate finally understands what is truly at stake. They are no longer wondering whether you care. They are wondering whether they waited too long to show that they care too. And somewhere tonight, your soulmate may be staring at your conversation, thinking about all the things they still need to say. Not because a stranger frightened them, but because a stranger accidentally revealed something your soulmate should have realized long ago. The greatest danger was never discovering who you really are. The greatest danger was losing you before they bothered to find out.